I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We are thrilled to be here with you tonight. We have an amazing lineup. We have two segments we are doing. Our second guest is the wonderful Behrooz Ghamari, who is a sociologist and historian who has written a lot about Iranian's revolution and the aftermath, and has a really incredible story that I would just say does not line up predictably with his political views and positions on Iran. So I'll leave you in suspense about that. But it's always a real pleasure to speak to Behrooz. So I'm really looking forward to that. But our first segment will focus on Latin America, South America, imperialism, colonialism, and the World Cup. And that will be with Ajamu Baraka and Clau O'Brien Moscoso. Before we bring those esteemed guests on, please do like the stream, give it a thumbs up. That's a free way to support the show. Also subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. We have a really exciting guest to talk about the recent Keir Starmer news in UK. I'll give you guys a hint. I'll tell you after our first segment who the guest is, but who's someone who you would really want to hear from when it comes to Keir Starmer? Guys, put it in the comments and I'll let you know. And that will be at our Friday stream. So this is the reason that you should definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any streams, because we do them usually on Fridays at 12, but every now and then we do them a different day. Also, please do become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. That's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. If you do that, you will get access to early release content. You will get access to extended interviews, bonus interviews. For instance, if you missed our live on Friday that we did with Haim Rashid Zabner, you will have access to a really spicy segment we do with him where he suggests that perhaps Israel has threatened Donald Trump and that may explain some of his behavior. He gets into some Epstein theories and also talks about Israeli terrorism against the United States in the form of the USS Liberty and what that history has to do with today. So again, that's at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. You'll also have early access to a debate that I'll be hosting between, wait for it, Yanis Varoufakis and John Mearsheimer about China. So that will be fascinating. Again, patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. We could not do this show without your support there. If you can't do the $5 a month level, which is just, by the way, 25 cents a day, Monday through Friday. So it's not even 25 cents a day, 7 days a week. But if you can't pull that off, but you still want to be part of the show and support the show, you can become Patreon supporters at the $1 a month level. And in fact, during the show, I will read some of the names of the most recent Patreon supporters because we love acknowledging you guys for your support, whether it's at the $5 a month level or the $1 a month level. Okay, so without further ado, we are bringing on our first two guests. Coming back to the show, show favorite, Ajamu Baraka is a human rights defender whose experience spans 4 decades of domestic and international education and activism. He is a veteran grassroots organizer whose roots are in the Black liberation movement and anti-apartheid and Central American solidarity struggles. He was the 2016 vice presidential candidate for the Green Party of the United States, and he's currently the national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace. Welcome back to the show, Ajamu.
It's
Hi.
so good to be back. Thank you so much, Katie. So good to be with you.
Thank you. And we are bringing on to the show, making her Katie Halper Show debut, Clau O'Brien Moscoso, who is a journalist, organizer, and co-coordinator of the Black Alliance for Peace Haiti Americas team. Originally from Barrios Altos, Lima, Peru, and raised in Kearney, New Jersey, she writes and advocates for anti-imperialist sovereignty, racial justice, and human rights throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And she's a regular correspondent for the Black Agenda Report. And she recently interviewed Evo Morales, which is very exciting, the former Bolivian president. And she's also been doing some great organizing locally around immigration and also around FIFA. So welcome back. Welcome for the first time, Clau, to the show.
Peace. Thank you so much for having me.
And Katie, before we go forward, I need to make a couple of quick corrections.
Oh, okay.
I really appreciate the fact that you said 4 decades. That eliminates 1 decade, and I'm feeling younger as a consequence. But it's been five
Okay.
decades. But the most important piece of it is that I'm no longer the national coordinator for the Black Alliance of Peace. I'm the director of their North-South Project for People-Centered Human Rights. We have 3 new fantastic leaders of the Black Alliance of Peace. So I just wanted to make sure that your viewers and listeners have that information.
Great. And we will update that in the description. And now everyone watching will know. So thank you for that correction. And I think I just saw the 5 decades and I said, that's impossible. It can only be 4. No, actually, I think I must have read something that had not been up to date. So thank you for corrections. And again, by the end of the show tonight, it will be updated. So I wanted to ask both of you, what is political about see as political, which is the World Cup. And this is something, of course, that does unite a lot of people around the world. It's called football in South America. It's called soccer here in the United States. But what are you guys calling for? Because you actually have a campaign around the World Cup. And maybe Ajamu, we'll start with you, and then Clau, you can tell us about where you just came from.
Yeah. Well, Katie, the World Cup is very political. In fact, that is the issue. The very fact that the U.S. has been allowed to host the World Cup is a political decision, especially in light of the kinds of activities that the U.S. has been involved in over the last few years. We can go further than that, but at least over the last few years. You know, Katie, if any country on the planet have been engaged in a series of behaviors we see on the West Bank of Palestine, they would not be allowed to host the games. If any other country had engaged in a war of choice and attacked another country simply because it could, resulting in death and destruction, they would not have been allowed to host the games. If a nation laid siege on a sovereign nation of Cuba, they would not be allowed to host the games. If they were engaged in an ongoing genocide in Gaza, resulting in thousands of deaths, they would not be allowed to host the games. But yet, the U.S. that's involved in all of those activities have been allowed to host this celebration of the planet. And we believe that was an obscene decision and one that required opposition. And so we came together and we formed a coalition called the Anti-Fascist Football Coalition. And we raised the issue of the U.S. hosting the games, and we demanded that FIFA move the games. Well, of course, they did move the games because all FIFA was thinking about was basically the possibility of making, 10 or 11 billion dollars from the games. And so the games went forward. So we had to take the only logical and principled position, which was to, in fact, call on the international community to boycott the games. And that's what we have been involved in for the last few months, raising these issues of the obvious political and moral contradiction of the games taking place in the U.S. And raising our voice in opposition to any attempts to try to sports wash, if you will, normalize genocide, and to continue with the lack of accountability, in fact, the impunity of the U.S. operating beyond the bounds of international law and morality.
Well, I mean, it was a rhetorical question in case people didn't know. I do know that it's political. In fact, it's the only reason as someone who doesn't really follow sports that I follow these games, because of the fascinating history. Going back to, I mean, sometimes the history is sometimes right now it's a very scary history, and we can trace that back to Chile and the stadium where Behrooz was killed, for instance. I'm actually going to ask you the next question, Clau, and I'm going to remove myself from the screen because I just realized that my internet, I think, needs to be plugged in and unplugged. So I will hear you because I'll be watching on my phone, but you won't see me, but I'll be listening. So Clau, what can you add to this? Both the present campaign, also, I know you just came from a fan zone, what that means for people who don't follow sports like me, and what your connection is to this issue.
Yeah, well, so as Comrade Ajamu was saying, right, the World Cup is, you know, in the U.S., U.S.ians don't really, I mean, you call it soccer and it's football in the rest of the world, right? But it is, the eyes of the world are on this game, right? Like millions, billions of people outside of the U.S. are watching this, and in the U.S. too, right? So it provides a legitimizing force, right, in this sports washing, right? So I just came back from the England fan zone in the Ironbound of Newark, where England versus Ghana was playing, the Black Stars were playing, right? And raising the contradiction with some of the folks in Black Alliance for Peace and in the Anti-Fascist Football Coalition that are working locally to engage the masses of the people and talk about, I mean, it's an amazing feat to be in the World Cup, right? I don't want to necessarily take that away, right? That pride. But we do want to say, like, particularly around England, right? There's a lot of contradictions, right? Palestine Action being one of them. I mean, if we're specifically talking about Palestine and England, this starts with the Balfour Declaration, right? So even historically, we can engage this issue, but currently, England is not allowing people to even say Palestine, right? Are jailing, you know, people that dissent, like the activists with Palestine Action. And, you know, I think it's also really important, and maybe Ajamu, you can speak more to this, right? The importance of an African formation in calling for a boycott within the belly of the beast, right? Like, sort of like, hey, we're in the house, boycott us, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's a very important point that people need to be aware of. The fact that a Black internationalist, anti-war, and defender of human rights made this call. And we made this call in solidarity with other colonized people, in particular in solidarity with the people of Palestine, of Venezuela, of Cuba, of the undocumented in the U.S. who've been terrorized by ICE, on behalf of the Black political prisoners and indigenous political prisoners in the U.S. We have made this call to raise up the issue of human rights and the fact that we have a globalizing fascist movement led by the U.S. and that we weren't going to allow FIFA and the World Cup process to distract us from what we need to be engaged in, and that is effective political opposition. We were not going to allow FIFA and the U.S. and their corporate sponsors to normalize the kind of lawlessness that we've seen over the last few years that have intensified. And so that has been the objective of our work. And it's very interesting that in the few weeks in the lead up to the beginning of the World Cup, that call that we made began to gain traction. We were told at first that it was something that was pie in the sky and it wasn't going to happen. We weren't naive. We didn't believe that the international bourgeoisie that was going to travel to the U.S. was going to pull their tickets and that come. But we believe that taking a principled position was imperative. And we made that call, we made that position, and people are thinking about these games. They've been exposed to the kind of behaviors that people were subjected to who were trying to travel to the U.S. From various countries, primarily from the global South. And people began to question the wisdom of attempting to host a gathering like this for the international community in a country that is clearly on the road, or many of us believe already have arrived at fascism.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I've reconnected. So, but I also heard everything you said. Now, Clau, before we move on to this discussion and also discussion of fascism, I want to know if you could share these two videos that you sent me, where they were taken and what's happening. Anything you need to tell us about what's happening before you play them, and where and when they're from?
Not really. If you play the one with me first, it kind of explains a little bit, but the one with JP sort of lays out the work that we've been doing. Great. So if you want to start with the one with me and then my comrade.
This is Clau O'Brien Moscoso reporting live for Black Agenda Report and Sovereign Media. I'm at the Newark fan zone in the Ironbound for the England versus Ghana game. We're out here watching the Black Stars, and we're talking about the contradictions of this game, right? The contradictions that England and the Palestine Action lawsuit. So we're here talking to folks. Follow me for more.
Okay, great. And let's hear your comrade next.
Peace, everybody. This is JP with the Black Alliance for Peace, New York City, New Jersey. And we're out here at the Fan Fest, Fan Village for the FIFA World Cup. It's England versus Ghana, and we're out here letting folks know about the contradictions that the match represents. We're talking to folks about England's complicity in the genocide in Palestine, and also just right here in Newark, New Jersey. I've been talking to folks about how just up the road, about 10 minutes, is a Geo Group facility called Delaney Hall, where they're holding Africans, they're holding all sorts of people. And so we're just trying to raise the contradictions to let folks know that, like, while the World Cup final is also just 10 miles away from here in Delaney, that we need to talk about this. We need to be talking about these things. And I'm out here as a part of the broader effort to tell people to boycott the World Cup, to boycott the United States, and to shut down Delaney Hall, to abolish ICE, to free Palestine, and to say that we must reject U.S. imperialism, defeat U.S. imperialism, to make our America's a zone of peace and make the world that we need.
So how are people responding to this, by the way?
Positively. I mean, people are. We say enjoy the games if you go to them. The call, of course, was for the international community, but I think people understand the context of the moment, and people have not been hostile. They have been receptive to the message, and that's a good thing for those of us who organize.
Right. Yeah. And Clau, did you have any good interactions just now?
Yeah, no. People are completely aware of the fact and all of the reasons why, the World Cup should be boycotted. I think even people that aren't political and are seeing what's happening are like, yeah, no, this is crazy, right? When we speak to our, comrades and Palestinian organizations, they're most excited about what comes next after the World Cup, which is Boycott the U.S., right? A BDS USA movement. Because we understand too, right? Like, of course, Zionism is a contradiction here, but Israel will not be doing what it's doing without U.S. support in every way. So in order to sort of sharpen that spear, that tip of the spear, that we actually need to say, here is the primary contradiction. And so we need to boycott this.
Right. Yeah, great. Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this with other guests, but one of the things that really bothers me about the America First articulation of what's happening in Israel is this idea, and I've literally heard people say it, like, this isn't who we are. Supporting genocide isn't who we are. Maybe I would like to think that, like, maybe for many people here, it's not, but it's certainly not. It's not a historical departure. I mean, perhaps in magnitude, but it's certainly not a historical departure for the U.S. government. And I think it's important to remind people of that. So I appreciate what you just said, Clau. I wanted to cover a bit of the racism and xenophobia that we've seen in the context of FIFA this year. So there have been these immigration checks, hassling of certain teams, mainly from the global south, refusal to allow in staff supporting crew member from Iran. And in terms of the treatment of Iran, according to NBC, and we have this headline, Homeland Security is changing guidelines for Iran soccer team's next match. A spokesperson said the department will allow Iran to travel to the next game location a day early. Wow. Okay, so wow, a day early. As per the article, the team will now be allowed to travel to Seattle 2 days before its game, allowing an extra day beyond the 24-hour window was given for its first 2 games, but it will still be asked to depart after the match wraps up. So in other words, they can't sleep in the United States. They have to fly right away. So what are your responses to that, to this generosity?
Wow.
Okay, here I am. I mean, it's kind of crazy that this is even a thing, right? I mean, even with the Iran-Belgium game, for example, right? They took a goal away from Iran, and FIFA said, we're going to apologize, but they're not giving Iran the points, right? So that's like one of the many contradictions that I think we can point to, saying that, one, this is sabotage, just straight up, right? But even despite all that, look at how Iran is playing, right? Like they have, the backpacks of the Mnab 168, the children that were massacred, right? They are consistently, showing grace on the pitch, on and off the pitch. So I think, it's pretty amazing to see how the Iranian team is doing. We also want to say that I think it was yesterday or the day before, Iran played in LA, right? The Iranian monarchist Gusanos. I thought Cuban Miami Gusanos were the worst. Holy crap. No, I was so wrong. And they're there, and what can they say, right? They're out here with their monarchist flag. Children, it's 168 children. What do you say to this? So I think it's it was really good for our folks to be out there pushing back against that. I didn't send you the clip for this, but Sovereign Media, one of the reporters, Charles Shue, did a really good report on what happened in LA. And this is part of the anti-fascist football coalition that we have been working with for the past few months. The first phase being Move the Game. Now we're in the second phase of Boycott the World Cup, Boycott the U.S. And we've been working with 35 plus organizations, not just in the host countries, the 3 host countries, but in Iran and Gaza, worldwide. It's good that we have a lot of, grassroots support in this, and that we're mobilizing our folks, but it's imperative to have opposition to this.
And if I can, let me add one additional piece. That again, this is another example of the absurdity of the games taking place in the U.S. If a host nation would have done what the U.S. did in suggesting to FIFA that it could not guarantee the safety and security of a team that was participating, that would have been enough, again, to pull the games. But the Trump administration was quite clear, saying that basically we can't and we won't guarantee that. This is another example of the kind of absurdity and obscenity of the games taking place in the United States of America.
Right. I wanted to also show a tweet from the North-South Project for People-Centered Human Rights, which is your organization, Ajamu. Let's take a look at what they said. On June 21st, it's that tweet, Brad. On June 21st, Iran's national football team secured a goalless draw against a heavily favored Belgian side in their second match of the 2026 World Cup. Were it not for a highly controversial offside call, they would have won outright with the only goal of the game. And then actually what I wanted to show was the very clever tweet from Ajamu in response to that, which is the response about this is a metaphor, Brad. Okay, this is a metaphor for how the West emerged hegemonic and why it is on the decline. So can you expand on that, on what you mean there?
That basically the U.S., it will get what it wants through the force of arms. If the playing field is even, it will make sure that it's unfair. And when it can't control the playing field, then what we see is what we see developing right now globally, and that is that the U.S. is unable to compete and is on a decline. And the only way that they're going to, and the attempt that they're trying to make to try to put a break on that decline is, again, falling back to their most effective tool, which is the tool of force and arms and war.
Right. Yeah, precisely. So I wanted to also play a quick video of FIFA President Gianni Infantino on his relationship with Trump and how they plan on handing out the championship trophy this year.
Yeah. Will the president be giving out the World Cup? We will be together with the president, enjoying the final and handing the trophy to the winner, of course, together.
Together you'll be doing it.
Of course, we are together all the time.
Well, you're about halfway through. You have to be pleased, and I just love what's been happening so far.
So what's your response to this unity that we're seeing between Trump and Infantino?
Well, it's consistent. I mean, FIFA is a institution, a structure that emerged out of the West beginning in 1904. And it reflects the kind of power dynamics that are now hegemonic in the world. That basically it is a Western institution. In the process of its evolution, it basically colonized international football. And so for it to be joined at the hip with the greatest monopoly of gangster capitalism on the planet, the United States of America, makes perfect sense. And the way in which they have commodified international football, yes, again, is a reflection of the hegemony of neoliberalism and the utter corruption of a game that millions of people around the world love.
Yeah. Yeah, and aside from Infantino, the former president of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, he was in the Panama Papers, right? This is a corrupt gang that uses football as what they get money from, right? So as Ajamu was saying, right, this is a capitalist imperialist class that has taken over the game. And not only, I would say that FIFA is complicit in this by the very fact that the games are happening here, but specifically with the Gaza peace plan, FIFA is set to support the creation of 50 football stadium pitches on literally on the ruins of Gaza, right? So I think they go beyond just being complicit to full partner in genocide. Right. Yeah.
So shifting gears to although again it's related because this is such a beloved game in South America, but I wanted to talk about what is happening right now in Peru and Colombia. And Ajamu, you're based in Colombia right now. Clau, you're from Peru. So Ajamu, let's start with you. Tell us about the elections in Colombia. What do we need to know about them? What do we need to know about the people running?
Well, we have the possibility of a new right-wing president in Colombia. I think most of your listeners are aware of the fact that the current president, Gustavo Petro, his term is up. And Ivan Cepeda, who ran under the banner of the historical PAC, the same party that brought Petro to power, was the candidate for this year to provide some degree of continuity hopefully for the progressive politics of that administration. It appears, though, as a consequence of perhaps fraud, intervention on the part of nefarious forces, including an allegation that Petro raised that Israel may have been involved in hacking the election. It appears that the right-wing president is going to be named. That may take place as early as tomorrow, but at the latest on Thursday. That would be a very significant blow because the only states that exist that still have some degree of oppositional force to the colonization of the Americas was Colombia and Mexico. You can't even put Brazil in that category. So this will be a significant step forward for the plan of the U.S. to basically shore up its base in the Western Hemisphere by getting rid of another progressive government. And now if that happens, then the focus would be on Mexico. So it has regional and, in fact, global implications.
Right. And what would be the motive of Israel if it were to have been intervening? Why would they do that?
Because the Israelis are fascists also, and they have they are cooperating with the lead fascist power, which is the U.S. There's something that is called Honduras Gate, in which it was revealed that there was one aspect of their cooperation was revealed when the U.S. and Israel worked together to get the former president of Honduras sprung from his sentence in the U.S. as an international drug pusher as a consequence of a pardon by Donald Trump, and that was part of them shoring up right-wing forces in the region. Israel has an interest in Latin America. It is a major arms seller. It trains various police forces and military forces here in the region, and is part of the global plan, basically, to ensure that it survives as a fascist settler entity, but also that is in alignment with the plan on the part of the U.S. To assert itself globally, to make sure that they're able to protect and shore up and advance the interests of the collective West that Israel sees itself as a part of.
Right. And tell us more about these two characters, what they represent, and their own biographies. The two candidates.
Well, De La Esprada is a lawyer. He was notorious for defending a number of big drug lords in the country. He's a business owner. He's part of the extreme right. It was clear that the right wing didn't have a charismatic leader, and seemed like that there was a real possibility that Zapata could win the presidency. And so he was sort of brought out of nowhere. He is a U.S. citizen, and he gives some very dynamic right-wing speeches. And he is on the way to the presidential palace. Now, what's dangerous about this in so many ways is that one of the things he said he was going to do once he ascended into power was to disembowel the left. That's a very serious comment in the context of Colombia, because we know that from Colombian history that is in fact how the Colombian elite deals with the left. In fact, the Patriotic Union suffered thousands of deaths when it attempted to enter into above ground electoral politics. And so people take that threat very, very seriously. And of course, Iris Zapata on the other side represents the progressive social forces, unions, Afro-Colombians, indigenous, working class people who are trying to continue with a progressive trajectory in Colombian politics. They want to see an end to the armed conflicts. On the other hand, the right-wing candidate says it's going to end any kind of communication with these armed groups and bring back the Colombian national security state. So that means more war.
Right. Wow. And what do you have to of course, I'm going to ask you about Peru, Clau, but anything you want to add about what's happening in the Colombia elections?
Yeah, I mean, to Ajamu's points, I think we are it's dark times, right? In Latin America, I think Colombia might be seeing a return of, Chavez called Colombia the Israel of Latin America. I think they're going to see a return to that. In Peru, Fujimori it's not announced yet, but likely seeming that she will be coming out as winner. And in very similar fashion, there's a lot of intervention from the U.S. Ambassador, and that's been the case for decades, right? And Fujimori obviously has a very long history in Peru. Her father was the former genocidaire and dictator of Peru during the 90s. What's called the internal armed struggle between from 1980 to 2000, where on the low end, the numbers are over 70,000 murdered, massacred, mostly in the mining corridor of the Andes. And I mean, to this day, we're still finding mass unmasked graves, right? And so it continues to be an issue. But I think more importantly, right, I mean, mentioned before that the Colombian, this guy is born in the U.S. Similarly, Noboa was born in Ecuador. Not born in Ecuador, actually, famously. Right. Born in Miami, Rodrigo Paz was born in Spain. Right. Rodrigo Paz was born in Spain, right? He's the son of a former Bolivian president who was forced into exile. So I don't think this gets talked about very often, but the Vox party in Spain, right? They signed the Madrid Forum a couple of years ago, and all of these governments signed on Keiko Fujimori's party. I'm not sure about Colombia's potential, president right now, but a lot of these forces that we're seeing, even in Bolivia, right? The Cruceñistas, Juvenil Cruceñistas, they're a right-wing paramilitary youth group from Santa Cruz, signed on to the Vox Madrid Forum, right? So we are seeing, as John has been saying, and as BAP has been saying, right, this U.S.-led global fascism. Yes, BAP is Black Alliance for Peace. As we've been saying, right, this is a age of neo-fascism, but it's a declining empire. However, like any dying animal, it is thrashing out, and these are very violent times.
Right. And what can you tell us? Well, I guess let's see. About fraud allegations in Peru. So for a lot of the fraud allegations. So in the pre-vote count, it had Sanchez, who's the Juntos por el Perú party candidates and the left-wing candidate winning by far, by fairly large margins. Keiko, I mean, this is her fourth time running. I can't imagine that the people of Peru actually, I literally cannot imagine this, that people voted for her. I covered the election on election day in Queens at Queens College, because that's where where New York Peruvians were voting. And of course, right, like the diaspora vote tends to be more on the right wing. But even, with not just, so I'm in BAP, obviously, but I'm also in a Peruvian diaspora organization called Calpawan. And we mostly sort of agitate and do a lot of political education with Peruvian diaspora youth. And the youth is like, we're not, I don't think that we have as much near or like proper memory
of the anti-communism of the 80s and 90s. So it's less. I think that works less with us as it does with our parents, right? Mom would never vote for Fujimori because we're from Barrios Altos, where one of the massacres took place in 91, right? The 8-year-old boy that was massacred in Barrios Altos, that was my friend. So this is like, we it's not just, theory, although sure it is, but this is like, personal people's lives, right? During the Fujimori regime, he sterilized over 300,000 indigenous women. To this day, have not gotten reparations, nothing. So I think, and we've spoken about this within BAC, right? The sort of backlash. This is what we're seeing now, I think, is a backlash of what the pink tide was. But, the response to that is going to be blood red, meaning like the masses of the people are going to, move
further than they did during the pink tide. That's what you're suggesting.
100%.
Yeah. And what can you tell us about this massacre? And I'm sorry that you were friends with the victim of the killing of this 8-year-old boy. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, this was a massacre that took place in Barrios Altos in 91, November of 91, if I'm not mistaken. It was a pollada, like a fundraiser where people make, Peruvians are very famous for rotisserie chickens, pollo a la brasa. So a lot of our fundraisers end up being like big family dinners. So they were having a pollada for this kid's birthday. It was his birthday party. And a armed paramilitary group, Grupo Colina, which was later found out that they had funding from Fujimori and the CIA, shockingly, killed 15 people in this pollada. A year later is when we migrated.
Wow. And just, I'm sorry about that. My condolences. And just to return to the allegations of fraud in Colombia, by the way, this is what I'm just reading from Al Jazeera. So why is Petro alleging fraud? Petro took to X to denounce in a series of posts what he said was voter fraud committed with the help of Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Petro said there was evidence of manipulation of Form E14, the official handwritten tally of sheets filled out by poll workers at each voting station. The form is a physical record of the vote count and is meant to prevent electoral fraud. It is filled out by hand, and digital scans are also uploaded to the National Registry's portal for public auditing. If found to have errors, parties may request a recount. Petro alleged that foreign actors accessed the National Registry's website and rewrote voting data on some E14 forms. Quote, today we have evidence of a change in IP addresses of several servers of the National Registry, he posted. This means that the software was compromised and others wrote data for polling stations and voting posts. The only entity in the world capable of doing that is the state of Israel. I mean, I think the United States could do that too, no? But Petro added, without providing evidence of Israel's alleged involvement, Petro said his party had requested a technical audit of the voting software before the elections and asked authorities to retrieve the digital footprints of all digitally transmitted documents to avoid modification. He claims those requests were ignored. The outgoing president shared videos of what he alleged captured the premeditated modification of E14 forms. He also claimed the manipulation was done from the offices of the Bautista brothers. Anything you ask, we can move on, but do you want to add anything about the Bautista brothers?
Only that this is a corrupt family that provides the voting machines for Colombia. There's been allegations against their corruption in other elections. Is another example of what happens when you allow private companies to have that kind of power to have an impact on your electoral process. So this time there may be some physical evidence that can be surfaced that will put a real damper on the attempt on the part of the U.S. and others to ensure that there's a right-wing new government in Colombia. Right. So the issue of legitimacy is going to be a real contending point going forward.
And another thing I want to just add is that, so De La Espriella, the conservative, the right-wing one, has voiced a lot of support for Israel. He made pro-Israel promises and said his government would, quote, defend Judeo-Christian principles, end quote. He pledged to reverse Petro's 2024 decision to cut ties with Israel and his promise to relocate the Colombian embassy to Jerusalem. And Netanyahu congratulated De La Espriella on Monday, saying, quote, I look forward to working with you to strengthen the bond between Israel and Colombia. So interesting, very interesting.
Consistent.
Yeah.
Consistent, yes.
Right. Yeah. And again, with Israel, what constantly happens, and we talked about this with Haim Rashid Zabner, who again is a former Israeli. He's has been living in London for decades. He wrote a book on the Israeli army, an army like no other. And we talked about how, and he's the son of 2 Holocaust survivors, by the way. So he's part of this great organization called Holocaust Survivors and Descendants Against Genocide. And we were talking about how, you know, you get called an anti-Semite for making allegations that aren't even, that they're not even about Jews. They're about Israel and Israelis. And when you make these allegations, and I understand why, because we do come off as unfairly as conspiracy theorists, precisely because Western media never reports on the truth. And ironically, I have to wind up pointing to Israeli media to say, no, there was a Hannibal directive where they said that they kill their own. And you don't even have to look at a left-wing Israeli newspaper. It's in, the biggest Israeli newspaper. No, there was mass rape, not of Israelis on October 7th, but mass systemic, I should say, if not mass, systemic rape of Palestinians, both before and after October 7th. And so because of the way the media covers for Israel and whitewashes Israel's crimes, if you're not actually connected to alternative media, then we, those of us who are and actually have access to the truth, we're the ones who sound crazy. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look, one of the most effective weapons that have been deployed now by Zionists was their successful attempt, not just attempt, but their successful move to collapse Zionism with Judaism,
right,
and to collapse Zionism with the state of Israel. And so that if one questions or criticizes the state of Israel, then you are ipso facto criticizing Jews, and therefore you run the risk of being branded anti-Semitic.
right.
I mean, the International Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, that's a political movement that's been quite successful in conflating those two elements, and has now created a very effective weapon, because now you have people who are openly saying that if you criticize Israel, then you are in effect anti-Semite.
Right. Which again, this is not my priority, is not Jewish safety, but the irony is, as a Jew, I would really appreciate if people did not do that, because the world sees what's happening in Gaza, justifiably, because it is this, as a live stream genocide, and the claim that all Jews support this is just disgusting. And obviously, it just shows you how cynical the people who talk about Jewish safety are, because if they cared about that, they would never go around saying that Jews are a monolith who support Israel. But they don't care about Jewish safety. In fact, they need anti-Semitism because they need that to justify Israel's existence, et cetera, et cetera. Any final words? This has been so enlightening. I love this combination of guests. Anything else you want to say about, Iran, about empire, about hegemony?
Well, check out peoplecenteredhumanrights.com. This is the project's website, where we have not just around the Boycott the World Cup and Boycott the U.S. work that we're doing, but all of the work that we do, right? Last year, we went to Ecuador, actually, on a election observer delegation, specifically in Afro-Ecuadorian sectors, right? So this is very important work that we're doing, sort of linking up the struggles of the global North and the global South, right? I was in Bolivia last year for Indigenous Peoples Day. It was the first encuentro of the intercontinental anti-colonial movement, and I spoke on behalf of BAP, Black Alliance for Peace, and I spoke on Haiti, right, specifically on the new multi-purpose or multi-service support mission, whatever, the new U.S. UN occupation of Haiti that has been continuous since 2004, and really since they, became the first Black republic in the Western Hemisphere. So yeah, check out peoplecenteredhumanrights.com, blackallianceforpeace.com, Black Agenda Report on Wednesdays.
Yeah, great. Also, Ajamu, I will hand you the final word, but I would be remiss if I didn't give you the chance to react to a clip. I did want you to react to a clip of, I'm sure you're a big fan of Susan Rice. And she had something interesting to say, not surprisingly, about the Iran war. I know that the great Glenn Ford, I believe he coined the term the Black Misleadership class. So let's take a look at what Susan Rice said, and then I would love to hear your response to her. And this, again, is her being asked about whether or not it's good that the war with Iran is over.
Isn't a weak peace agreement better than a resumption of a war, which I know you opposed from the start?
I opposed this war because it was a stupid war, and it was obvious that when you wage a stupid war that every prior president had the wisdom to avoid, that you were going to end up with either bad outcomes or worse outcomes.
So this ends what you saw as a stupid war.
It ends a stupid war. You get bad outcomes or worse outcomes. This is a very bad outcome. I obviously think we shouldn't have been in this war in the first place because it was obvious for decades that the only way to resolve this problem is through diplomacy. And now we're back to diplomacy with a far weaker hand. Yes, their military has been degraded, but Iran has now figured out they can use the Strait of Hormuz to hold us and the global economy hostage anytime they want. And they've been playing that game over the last 48 hours.
But just to make that fine, because Ro Khanna, Democrat Ro Khanna, said that he supports this agreement, even though he says it's a shadow of the one you helped negotiate with for President Obama, or helped put together for President Obama. But he says he supports this because it ends the war, and that's the important thing.
We shouldn't be in this situation, John. This was an extraordinary strategic blunder. We are in this situation. And we have suffered enormously. The American people have suffered. We've lost 13 servicemen and women. We have paid over $50 billion of taxpayer money for a war we never should have waged. The American consumer is paying more than $50 billion in increased costs. Our standing in the world is weakened. And we've shown that when the United States, the greatest military on the face of the planet, and the Israeli army, the Israeli military throw the kitchen sink at Iran, they can be left still standing, which weakens us globally.
So no, she won't say that a weak peace is better than a continuation of war. What are your thoughts? Oh, and I should mention that Susan Rice is a former UN representative and also national security advisor to Obama. So Ajamu, what is your response to this analysis?
I think you hit the nail on the head. That basically what she represents is a very strong current within the Democrat Party and within the U.S. foreign policy community that wants to see the job finished. There's always this current that I believe that Iran had to be destroyed, and in fact, that current is still the predominant one, and that's why many of us believe that what we're going to see over the next 60 days is primarily a pause. And that the conflict will, in fact, pick up again because there is a real commitment, real belief that the only way that the U.S. is going to be able to maintain its presence in West Asia, to maintain the predominance of the petrodollar, is to make sure that it does not get pushed out of the region, and that is able to keep its vassal states in line. And that means destroying the only state in the region that can disrupt their plans for regional domination, and that is Iran. So it's not over. And there are significant forces in the Democratic Party that take that position. And that's why we say that both parties are, in fact, warmongering parties.
Yeah. And by the way, we should give Susan Rice credit for being a a renaissance woman of absurd positions. She also said, but as you said earlier about something totally consistent, she also said that, you know, the Russians were behind the George Floyd protests. So,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can't be Black people and other people of conscience who are opposed to the slaughter that takes place every year in the U.S. By the U.S. military that we call the police forces.
Right. Yeah. It has to be the Russians. The Ruskies are up to it. Yeah. I mean, which we heard. I mean, that was a big common refrain during the civil rights movement also.
Exactly.
So.
And Katie, the last quick word for myself on this, and again, we appreciate you bringing us on.
Of course.
I know this may be somewhat different for many of your viewers to see African people, African Americans, African people playing the role that we play in the Black Alliance for Peace. We are a internationalist organization, anti-imperialist organization, pro-peace, and pro people-centered human rights. In the tradition of our movement, this is the centerpiece of how we have moved for decades here in this country. And so we have a perspective, we have a position on all of these issues, and understand their interconnectedness, and understand that ultimately the only way we're going to be able to advance our interests is for those interests to be grounded in the broader interests of the working class and other colonized people, in order to basically put a break, not just a break, but to defeat the forces that are responsible for the continuation of the kind of death and destruction that characterizes the current political environment. So we're about struggle, we're about protecting human rights, and this campaign that we're involved in right now is just one aspect of the work that we are involved in. We hope people will support us. We get no big funding from these philanthropic organizations. We depend on the people, and we hope that you all help us to continue this work that we have embarked on.
Well, I will say that, yes, that's definitely what a lot of even like progressive media shows, obviously corporate media shows that, but we do make sure to bring on people like Margaret Kimberly and the great, talk about Renaissance man. I mean, prolific, he must never sleep, historian Gerald Horne. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like as soon as I have him on for one book, it's out of date. It's no longer his latest book.
Right.
Abuyami Azikiwe. Yeah. And Cherise Burden-Stelly. So
Dr. CBS. Yeah, she's a BAP member also.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we were one of the few places to cover what happened to the Uhuru movement and Amalia Shatella.
Yes.
So yeah, so my audience.
Yeah, we saw that and appreciate that. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, of course. Well, we appreciate everything you do, and come back on, please, and have a great night. And thank you for everything that you guys do. And we will correct your bio. Don't worry, Ajamu will correct it. Although I would like it if people thought I was out there for fewer years, but you're so honest. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Katie.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Bye. That was great. Oh, what a great combo. I really love when we have guests. I love, individual guests, and then I also love bringing guests together who really like. I mean, each of these guests are wonderful guests on their own, and I'd be happy to have them on their own as well. But people really are often like, what is it? The sum is greater than its parts or something. I'm getting the expression messed up, but we are so excited. Oh, let's see. How are we doing on likes? I'm sorry to chastise you guys, but how are we doing on likes? Because I have to train you guys. Let's see. We are doing okay, we're doing pretty well. If you haven't liked it already, please do like the stream. Brad, let's take a quick Behrooz. We are going to bring on Behrooz in like literally 2 minutes. And apologies for the delay, everyone. Let us just do a little palate cleanser, although it's not really palate cleanser because we're going to be talking about what we just left off on thematically with Behrooz. But I do want to tease this Patreon only interview that we did with Chaim Brashit Zabner. And if you haven't seen it and you want to, please do join patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. So let's take a look at this. And by the way, this is a discussion where we talk about how you're accused of being a conspiracy theorist if you dare criticize Israel.
There is a theory going around that the Israelis have intimated either to Trump or to someone who he listens to that his life is in danger. Of course, his life can only be in danger from Israel. So he knows that. And apparently he was told this. We don't know who was behind the 2 attempts to murder him. We don't know anything about this. It's amazing how little information has leaked out or has been shared about those 2 attempts to kill the most powerful man in the West. But we don't have any information. But if indeed they threatened his life, knowing Trump, and we all know him on some kind of level, and kind of like very low level, but he's working on that level. You would have thought that if somebody threatened Trump, it will fire him into action.
Right.
All that he is doing and saying is like that. He doesn't like to be threatened. And I think that he only agreed to sign the memorandum of understanding because Netanyahu threatened him. What he threatened him with, I don't know. But the signs are that Netanyahu had...
And to see what the signs show, please do go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. You'll see a great interview with Haim Rashid Zabner where we get into that and also the attack on the USS Liberty and Haim's thoughts on Thomas Massie. And by the way, Haim is one of the characters that we follow in our documentary about Holocaust survivors and their descendants speaking out against the Gaza genocide. So just very grateful to Haim for all of his work. So we are bringing on, I'm so thrilled to be bringing on someone who I've been wanting to interview for a while. I've had the pleasure of reading his books. I don't have them with me because I'm not at where I live full time right now. Behrooz Ghamari is an Iranian-born American historian, sociologist, and professor. He's the author of 4 books, including Remembering Akbar Inside the Iranian Revolution, and most recently, The Long War on Iran, New Events, Old Questions. He is also a fellow at the Center for Place, Culture, and Politics at the CUNY Graduate Center and is affiliated with the Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto. Formerly, he was professor and chair of the Department of Near Eastern Studies and director of the Center for Iran and Persian Gulf Studies at Princeton University. So welcome to the show, Behrooz.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course. Yes, I was thrilled. Aaron Mate and I had you on
Yes.
Useful Idiots, and that was a wonderful discussion. I want to ask you if you had anything that you wanted to say in response to what was discussed in either the clip we just showed with Susan Rice or just the discussion that we had with Clau and Ajamu.
I just need to give a nod to the Iranian national football team because this was such an amazing event. It's at so many different levels, and there were so many conversations in Iranian diasporic communities to boycott this team, and this is not our national team. This is a mullah's team, and then with all these obstructions that they faced. Attending the games and not getting visa and all these restrictions that you and your guests talked about, and they come to the field and basically flipped all these Iranians who basically were thinking of not supporting and booing the team, and they all became supporters of the team on the pitch and rooting for them. And they showed and played with such a great spirit, and I think that my hat's off to them, because under these kinds of adversarial circumstances, they showed a lot of integrity and dignity while playing a good game.
Yeah. How do you say congratulations or well done in Farsi?
We say tabrik.
Tabrik. Oh, that's not too hard. Yeah. Okay, tabrik. Yeah. Tabrik to the Iran team. Yeah. Behrooz, I wanted to start off by asking you about something I've heard you say that I find really fascinating, which is that, so much of the media and so many politicians point to protests in Iran as a sign of how oppressive and repressive and authoritarian the Iranian government is. But you have a different take on that. Can you expand?
There is no doubt that the Islamic Republic has and exercised this kind of repressive apparatus in the past 40 odd years since the time of revolution. And, it goes up and down how repressive they are. Sometimes there are openings, sometimes they shut down the civil society. And I always make this example of a good friend of mine from Romania who always said that, when people ask me, how's life in Romania? And I said that, it's like a bottle of wine. You have to ask, which year are we talking about? Right. This is exactly the same story in Iran. But the fact is that the reason we see these kind of protests in Iran, in addition to a reaction to repressive apparatus of the state, is also a kind of unusual and extraordinary revolutionary consciousness among Iranian people. And they learned this. I always say that this is a sort of possibly one of the greatest achievements of the Iranian Revolution of 1979. And people, generation after generation, inherited that kind of subjectivity, that kind of mentality, that they can always march on the streets and make their demands known to people in power. And it's always surprises me, although I study this, I've been studying this for more than 30 years or so, but every time it happens, it's quite surprising to me that how resilient people are and how often they go back to that default mode of rebellion and making their demands known. And I always again say that it's not the case that Iran is so repressive that forces people to come out on the streets, because there's absolutely no competition. There are so many repressive states around the world, but actually we don't see this kind of reaction on the part of people everywhere in the world. And in that sense, if you're looking for an exception, if you're looking for an extraordinary event that is happening in Iran, that exception is not the repression of the government. That exception is the way people react to that repression, which again is an inheritance of the revolution of 1979.
Right, and I heard you say that it's not that Iran is more repressive than its neighboring countries. In fact, you would say it's actually less when comparing it.
So no, that's true. I mean, again, sorry, I interrupted you.
Please.
I mean, if you look at, for example, Egypt, if you look at Saudi Arabia, if you look at Turkey, if you look at all the Gulf states, they're not bastions of democracy. We, for many years after the coup against Morsi, after the Arab Spring, there were more than 150,000 political prisoners in Egypt. And seldom you see that being reflected on the front pages of the New York Times or any other newspaper. And seldom you see that people actually pouring into the streets in defense of those political prisoners. Right. But once this happens in Iran, of course, I'm glad that the news of it gets out, and I'm glad that people talk about it. I'm glad that even if one person is arrested in Iran and faces torture, faces execution, we hear about it, people discuss it. But at the same time, we see also a very significant mobilization in society against these actions. And that I think that's really the part that often is missed in the mass media in the West.
Right. I mean, when you said that, and again, it's not something I didn't know, right? When you talked about the repression in neighboring countries, but I was really struck. I was like, oh my God, yeah. The fact that you don't hear that point made more just speaks to how the media bias. I mean, it's not even like, that point is never made. And it is so clearly relevant, because if you're looking at why the United States is doing what it's doing in Iran, and it's claiming it's because of the repressive nature of it, obviously a relevant question to ask for any journalist worth their whatever would be, okay, well, what are you doing about Egypt? What are you doing about Saudi Arabia?
That's right. I mean, that's a sign that questions the sincerity of this kind of politics. You know, when the U.S. government or in the media they talk about human rights issues and civil liberties issues in Iran, and they're so militant about doing something about it, and then leave all our allies in the region untouched. You understand that this is not about really human rights or civil liberties. This is instrumentalizing that in order to advance a particular political project, and this has been going on for since we remember from the time of Iranian Revolution. You know, it's been a sort of 46 year sort of practice that I always also say that the road to transformation of human rights condition in Iran goes through Cairo, Jeddah, and Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, and then it goes to Tehran. You know, because that's how we need to think about it, and otherwise it's a mere instrumentalization, exploitation of this issue to advance those political projects.
Right. And so, what is this political project?
The political project is, since the time of revolution, the political project for the U.S. has been to restore the map of the Middle East back to the way it was before the Iranian Revolution. And that's the political project. And they tried so many different ways of approaching this. They tried to appease the post-revolutionary state at the beginning. And of course, that appeasement ended very early on after the radical students took over American embassy in Tehran and the hostage crisis. So there was no way of defining an appeasement project at that moment. And then they supported Saddam Hussein to invade Iran, and not only the U.S., all European countries, plus and another entity that doesn't exist anymore, the Soviet Union, they all supported, and all the Arab countries, with the exception of Syria and Libya, supported Saddam Hussein war against Iran, which was the longest conventional war after the Second World War, for 8 years, and 500,000 people killed. And so that was the second way of the U.S. tried to sort of pressure the Iranian government to submit to that kind of project of going to pre-1979 map of the Middle East, meaning that Iran should not act in such a way that contradicts the U.S. interest in the region. Because pre-revolution, the Shah of Iran basically was an agent of advancing American interests in the region. I wouldn't say exactly he was a puppet and he never had any kind of agency of his own, but overall, in terms of regional geopolitics, that was his role. And then we see, administration after administration in the U.S. and also in Iran, there are always these moments that we come to points of a total war, and then it's avoided. This is total war, and it's avoided. And these are like always, the threat that the famous saying in every single American president was that all options are on the table about Iran. And these all options on the table was a boogeyman that was supposed to scare Iranians that you need to behave in such a way. And also, they always use the term to behave when it comes to Iranians. Other countries have policies and strategies. Iranians always have behavior, which is sort of an old colonial kind of way of thinking about other countries. But that's generally the project, and today we see that project is sort of diverging from what Israelis have in mind, because Israelis also had in mind, again, remember that pre-revolution Iranian state was the most important supporter of Israeli interest in the region, and Iran provided energy, gas, and oil, and to Israel, and but at some point in early 2000, Israelis decide that the best option for them is Syrianization or Libyfication of all powerful countries in the region, and that's their agenda, that's their goal. And they tried this with Iran, and to basically do something to totally disintegrate Iranian society, and in a sense, a society that is imploded on itself through civil wars, and exactly the same scenario in Libya and Syria. And Americans were not quite psyched about that possibility, because they understood that Iran is a much more powerful country than those other countries, much larger population, around 90 million people. And that kind of disintegration and chaos can easily spill over to the Gulf states. And the U.S., in that sense, was not really on board with that Israeli project. But Americans wanted to create a submissive state rather than a collapsed state.
Right.
And that's why this war was all about this. And a lot of people thought that the U.S. wants to install Reza Pahlavi, the former Shah's son, and transform the regime. I really don't think at any point they wanted to do that. And now they're coming out openly. J.D. Vance came out and openly said that wasn't part of the project. The project was to sort of weaken the state to a degree that they cannot pose any kind of challenge to American interests in the region. And as we see, of course, that intention didn't work out as they planned it.
Right. Yeah. Brad, by the way, Nate just sent you a video that's really good. So whenever that's ready, we can get to it. It's something I didn't think of. I can also play it actually in my window. Brad, let me know if you want me to do that. You want me to do that? Let's see. No, he's going to do it. Okay. Well, I'll just give people a sneak preview. It's very interesting. It's about the Shah and some of his statements on Israel, but we'll loop back to that. What do people need to know? People love starting the history of present day Iran, or the relationship between the United States and Iran. They love to talk about it as if it started with the Iranian Revolution. But you and others date it as another date. Cite another important date, which would be 1953. Yes. Can you talk about what happened then?
In 1953, this is a little bit of a background on that. At the end of Second World War, the U.S. finds itself in a very peculiar position. That we see the collapse of the old empires. The British and the French, mostly these two. And it wasn't quite clear that what kind of role the U.S. wants to play after the collapse of these empires. And they have a little posture of sympathy towards decolonization, democratic movements around the world. Even like Ho Chi Minh approached Americans, Fidel Castro approached Americans, and even Mohammad Mossadegh, who was the sort of the leader of nationalization of oil in Iran, approached the Americans. And they all thought that the US would be amenable and open to the possibility of the formation of democratic sovereign states. And I think that fork on the road, the US took the sort of the right side of that road, not right side of the history, but the right side of that road, that basically to replicate that kind of colonial relations. And this is the beginning of the Cold War. And in their mind, the main enemy of post Second World War was the Soviet Union and the spread of communism. And the guiding light for American foreign policy strategic thinking was to basically create obstacle for the advance of communist ideas around the world. And when the Iranian nationalization of oil happens, which was the Iranian National Oil Company was owned by the British. It was a joint project, and 80%. I mean, I want the people who are listening to this to pay attention. 80% of the profit would go to the British. 20% would go to the Iranian. This is Iranian oil, and so the Iranian Prime Minister. Mohammad Mossadegh said that this is very unfair. We nationalize oil and we renegotiate this contract, and of course the British didn't want to lose their privileged access to these resources, and finally sort of bring the U.S. to a position to overthrow the Iranian Prime Minister through a coup. This was possibly the most consequential CIA covert operation that really changed the history of the world in so many different ways. That's why a lot of people pay close attention to this 1953 coup in Iran. And so they ousted the president, the CIA, with the help of some Iranian military generals. They ousted the president, reinstalled the Shah, and for 25 years in Iranian lexicon political culture, that those years are known as the dark years of tyranny. And the CIA trained the Iranian secret police. They taught them how to torture. Mossad helped the Iranian Savak, the secret police. And thousands of people were arrested, tortured, many executed, with the knowledge of the CIA, with the help of the Mossad, and in so many different ways. The Iranian Revolution of 1979, I believe, was a response to that 1953 coup, and that's why the revolution was inherently an anti-imperialist revolution, and it was as radical and against the despotic rule of the Shah as it was against American imperialism, because the two were indistinguishable for that revolutionary movement. And so, of course, when people see that after the revolution, there's a takeover of American embassy. If you don't know the background of this, immediately you think that these are some crazy young students who are taking over American embassy. I mean, I'm not supporting it, but I understand where it comes from, because they had experienced this that once 25 years earlier, the U.S. concocted this coup through their networks based in the embassy, and they wanted to disrupt that possibility of a counter-revolution coup by the Americans. So one can understand and where it comes from without condoning, but
Sure.
But this is the logic of it, and I think that it's going to be very difficult to sort of rebuild that relationship now, especially after these last year 12-day war and this year 40-day war, and now these negotiations, and which the key point in this is how to build trust. Of course, here we talk about how can we trust Iranians, but I think the bigger question is that how can Iranians trust Americans? Because again and again, they've seen that they're not a reliable partner in any kind of negotiation.
Right. I mean, they often will use negotiations as cover to like engage in political assassinations, right?
That's right. And and this is and you know, I think that in the past 10 to 15 years, the Iranian state has shown considerable restraint. Assassination of there are 19 nuclear scientists were assassinated by the Israelis. Iranian embassy consulate in Damascus was bombed and 16 people killed in Damascus. The U.S. assassinated Iranian general, the head of the one of the generals of the Revolutionary Guards. Israelis assassinated Ismail Haniyeh while he was in Tehran attending the inauguration of the president. So the response from Iran was very tepid, you know, and the reason was that they did not want to escalate. They did not want to escalate. They did not want to turn this into a all-out war, because they knew if they escalate, it's going to turn into an all-out war. And at that point, everyone thought, at least in American Israeli intelligence circles, that they're basically paper tigers, Iranians. They threat, they take this sort of position of militancy and aggression, but when it comes to acting on it, they basically are ineffectual and scared. And they never understood that there is a political logic behind that. And the reason they couldn't understand that was that they always thought that the leadership in Iran is a sort of consists of these crazy mullahs, and they're irrational. You can't talk to them. They're suicidal. You can't trust them. And they don't think logically about their own interests, you know.
Right.
And but then, you know, one of the consequences of this current war was that, at least it appears to me that in the eyes of the world, even in the Western world, the Iranians appear to be pretty rational and logical and very measured.
Right.
And the Americans and Israelis are the crazy ones.
Right.
that you know, they basically untrustworthy, and they don't quite figure out what the exact objective of their actions are, and pretty much that's the definition of irrationality, you know, that if you don't understand the objective of your own actions, and not, you know, that's the ironic kind of consequence of this war, was to see that you know, Iranian foreign minister suddenly appears to be a very reasonable man,
right,
as opposed to American negotiators who are basically after the best real estate deals in Gaza. And So,
not to mention, I mean, the talk of theocracy. I mean, you hear a lot of members of the Trump administration talking about the, like religious fundamentalism. These are like Mike Johnson sent a red heifer to Jerusalem. Pete Hegseth, we've had soldiers calling in to complain that they've been told by generals and their superiors that Trump has been anointed by Jesus to engage in this war. These are people who want want to bring upon Armageddon. And it's such an inversion. I mean, I keep saying this. It's like what we're seeing so much now with Gaza, with Iran, with Lebanon. It's not just lies or like exaggerations. It's literally the inversion, right? So like the rational people are actually the ones who are cast as the irrational, bloodthirsty, backwards fundamentalists who are all one monolith. And
that's so true. I mean, even recently, in an interview, Marco Rubio said that we are dealing with the radical Shia. I'm reading this from. We are dealing with radical Shia clerics who make geopolitical decisions based on pure theology.
Right.
Really, like that's and then on this side they are talking about Armageddon and
or what about Amalek, right, with Benjamin Netanyahu?
That's I'm not saying that they don't believe in what their own religion, but this is not the way they think about their strategic posture, so I mean it's interesting. I mean this war actually turned out to be a very crucial world historical moment, I think, that we are moving away from this kind of unipolar world order,
right?
And that the U.S. would be in a position to exercise its authority with impunity, without any consideration, without any impediments that anybody can pose. But now the U.S. finds itself in a position that first they had to admit defeat.
Right.
And,
well, I mean, let's take a look at how our president is admitting defeat. I want to take a look at a recent Truth Social post that came from Tuesday morning. So let's take a look at this. Despite their protestations and false statements to the contrary, coupled with the drumbeat of the fake news, which is doing everything possible to make the U.S. Victory as small and insignificant as possible, Iran has fully and completely agreed to highest level nuclear inspections long into the future. Infinity. This will ensure nuclear honesty. If they do not agree to this, there would be no further negotiations, ! Based on this and other major concessions being made by Iran, I have agreed to allow the Hormuz Strait to remain open, all caps, with no further naval blockade. However, all ships are remaining in place should it be necessary to reinstitute the blockade, which seems at this point highly unlikely. The money and or sanctions that the U.S. Treasury is releasing goes into escrow controlled by the USA and will be used for the purchase of food and medical supplies exclusively from the United States, including corn, wheat, and soybeans from our great American farmers. These are things that are desperately needed by Iran. This is a humanitarian crisis, and I feel it is necessary to help. Wow. Now, before it is too late. Talks are going well. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So what is your response to that assessment?
I mean, I really think that we should refrain from commenting on Trump's tweets, because you never know what he's going to say tomorrow,
right.
And this is, I understand the politics of this, on the Iranian side, whatever concessions they give, they have to save face. And on American side, if President Trump is giving, if he is capitulating, he needs to do some face-saving moves. I mean, no one in the world would say that, okay, we were defeated and I'm sorry that I started this war. Obviously, I mean, that's a tall order, and not only Trump, no one else would do such admission. But the facts on the ground speak for themselves, and if you look at the the 14 points of memorandum of understanding, there is not a single point that indicates a concession from the Iranian side. This is so close to the original 14 points that Iranians proposed and was rejected off the bat by the White House. But here we are, and it's a good thing. It's the only concession Iranians are giving is that the fact that they commit themselves not to develop a nuclear bomb ever. Yeah. And but they made that commitment 20 years ago. I mean, this is not, and they and American intelligence reports from 2003 says that Iran has no intention of developing nuclear. This is from 23 years ago. Right. And so if that makes everyone happy, if they, all right, let's let them use that face-saving point and move forward. Sure. But the Iranians now are, I think, rightly, they left the meeting after Trump again threatened Iran with bombing, and the negotiators said that we cannot negotiate while at the same time your president is threatening to bomb us. Right. So they left the meeting. They said, okay, it's over. You either apologize or stop making these threats, because we are not going to negotiate under this kind of continuous cloud of threats and military action. Right. So the Pakistanis, again, invited Iranians back and mediated. They said that, no, that's okay. Let's go back and finish this first round of negotiation. But now that the fear of war has been transcended on the Iranian part. Yeah. And this was something they feared for many decades, and now it happened, and it's clear to both sides. I don't think that there is any possibility there that the U.S. would go back to an all-out war with Iran. Right. Because they realize that Iranians are going to deliver their promise and their threat that they're going to turn that war into a regional war, and they're going to destroy the entire infrastructure of the region and thus create a global recession, and then which would lead to economic depression worldwide. And so this is, one way or another, we need to come to terms and accept that this war is over, and now we have to find a way to come to terms with the consequences of it, right? And to rethink, particularly for the Gulf states, who for many decades they thought that American presence would guarantee protection and security for them. And now they're coming to realization that American presence is a liability.
Yes, right. That's fascinating. Yeah.
And I think that's a big kind of transformation of the regional geopolitics. Right. And if you add China to that, then you have a totally different kind of direction that the whole sort of, that's why I said that this is in so many different ways, this is the beginning of the collapse of a unipolar world order, that the US sits on top of it. And now there are other players who all have a claim about making decisions with global consequences.
Oh, that's fascinating. So can you expand more on this? And then I'm going to move to actually someone who's from the Iranian government who said something very similar to what you said. But talk more about this, the end of this unipolar order and the role that the war in Iran played in it.
That the two things happened. I think the war in Gaza changed our understanding of the world order, because this was supposed to be a rule-based world order. And as you mentioned earlier in your conversation with your other guests, there wasn't something completely knew about genocide in Gaza. The U.S. has been engaged in these types of genocidal acts for decades. In Indonesia, in East Timor, in Vietnam, you name it. In Latin America, in Central America, these things. But it was new in a sense that it was live streaming, and it sort of drew its power from the fact that it was done with impunity, and that fact was quite important. That without that, I don't think we would have the war in Lebanon or the war against Iran, because that kind of understanding of impunity that Israelis put on the table allowed Americans to rethink that kind of way of thinking about the rule-based world order. Now, and then Rubio very openly in the Munich Security Conference a few months back said that, we are inheriting the Western powers that we exercise for 400 or 500 years around the world without worrying about any kind of rules that would inhibit our desires and our authority. And then we have to go back to that time. And he even mentions that after the Second World War, we created all these rules and regulations. It's so bizarre. It's just like unbelievable. And then all the Europeans are sitting there applauding that we all want our old colonies back.
Right, exactly.
And but that's I think that was really the first steps towards the collapse of this unipolar world order happens with this kind of action that you exercise your authority with impunity without worrying about the consequences of your actions because you are invincible.
Right.
And now suddenly that mentality has hit a huge barrier in Iran and the Persian Gulf.
Right.
And they realize that this is not really feasible. And of course, Iranians, and one of the reasons, one of the reasons that they rushed towards signing this memorandum of understanding was not only the upper hand that Iran had in the war front and blocking the Strait of Hormuz. It was the fact that Iranians were really moving very fast towards alliances with China, and Chinese are sort of sitting very comfortably and patiently watching this unfold. They have different kind of imperial exercise. They don't want, like the Americans, to be involved in the political affairs of anywhere they invest, and they just expand economically, they invest, they transform societies without basically having a particular interest in influencing the political circumstances of those places. And now, the Chinese are sitting back, seeing how the U.S. is sort of, the U.S. policies are unraveling, and the Chinese approach the Saudis. They signed a contract with the Saudis, a long-term economic cooperation, trade. They tried to bring Iranians and Saudis together, and they offered a very actually interesting package to Iranian for trade for a 25-year agreement. Iranians were sort of reluctant to sign this, and still sort of remain reluctant. And I think one of the reasons that the U.S. is rushing towards ending this issue, and that you see that in Trump's tweet, that they see a lot of opportunity in the Iranian market, and they basically don't want to lose this opportunity to Chinese expansion in Iran. And the time is short, and they have to act very quickly. And this is happening very fast, and they have to intervene. But we'll see. I mean, that kind of multipolarity, I think now it's sort of emerging out of this war. But China and Russia and the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Group, all these sort of very preliminary signs of emergence of this multipolarity we see. I mean, it's not going to happen in the next 6 months, a year, or 2 years. Maybe in 10 years we see something like that. But I think definitely if 10 years, 20 years from now, we see a different kind of world, historians would say that the point of departure for that was this war against Iran, and this kind of it all started from there.
Wow. Well, Behrooz, I want to ask you a bit about your personal journey, because I mean, you are very, I would say, one of the most kind of persuasive anti-war voices and anti-regime change voices, and you even say things that are like complimentary about the Iranian government. And I mean, that's not weird for people who come on my show, but it is, I would say, surprising given your relationship with Iran. Can you talk about your own history with Iran and what almost happened to you?
The revolution. I mean, I was a big part of the revolution of 1979, and as you know, as a young Marxist student, and I was a firm believer that what Jean-Paul Sartre once said, that if you are not a Marxist when you are young, you don't have any dreams. If you remain Marxist when you are old, you are an idiot. I don't subscribe to the second part of that. But for us as young students, we were anti-imperialist, we were Marxist, we had socialist ideas, and we were part of the revolution. Small part of the revolution, but nevertheless a part of the revolution, very active. And but of course, like all other revolutions in the world, what appears to be a symbolic language of freedom, justice, egalitarianism, socialism, redistribution of wealth, all these things everyone agreed on. But after the revolution, when the government is formed and they want to make that a reality, then all the differences appear. And I found myself on the sort of opposite side of the government, and try to organize against the new post-revolutionary government, and possibly for 2 years, there was a sort of a space for all these opposition to exist openly in civil society. But then there is a sort of a shutting down of that space, because there was sort of one of these groups, the Mujahideen Khalq and now MEK, they started assassinating the government officials. They put a bomb in 1981 on June 28. They put a bomb in the headquarters of the ruling party and killed 110 people of the members of the Politburo of the ruling party, and 25 members of the parliament were killed overnight. And they assassinated the president. They killed the prime minister, and the government, of course, they reacted in the same way. They arrested everyone they could get their hands on. And in summary trials, they executed thousands of people. And that went on for 2 years of mass executions. And, I was also arrested, at that time. Very difficult time, of course, that in 1981, and I was in prison till 1985, and I spent 3.5 years on death row, but I think one needs to understand that there's a context to it. Exactly the way we were talking about, the U.S.-Iran relations, and these are not crazy mullahs and this and that. At the time I understood that, I never thought that I was a victim of anything. I was a political actor. I had an agenda, and I find myself on the losing part of this struggle, so unfortunately, thousands of people lost their lives, and that's a deep trauma in Iranian society, and that sort of episode repeated itself in 1988 at the end of Iran-Iraq war, that thousands of political prisoners were executed again. And these are, scars that societies endure, and they have to sort of find a way to deal with these scars, with this trauma, and try to make political and historical sense of it. And I always thought that I think I mentioned this in another program, that if your politics cannot be the extension of your own trauma, that's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
And I have different ways of dealing with my own trauma, and I'm a human being. I've seen many friends who were executed. I've lost many loved ones. I've lost so many people I didn't know, but of course, any person who loses their life, any person who is tortured in prisons, a part of me aches, but how do I make sense of that? And how do I want to approach, in political terms, a way out of that kind of structures of power? And we want to move away from that structure of power. Right. And I think usually people who extend their own trauma to their politics actually reproduce that kind of structures of power rather than moving away from it. And and I think, in the past 40 years or so, many things had changed in Iranian society. I think the Iranian society, the Islamic Republic, is not exactly the same state that it was in the 1980s. Iranian society is not the same society of 1980s, 1990s. And as we discussed earlier, the Iranian society is so vibrant, and I wish people could go and see the extent to which these kind of intellectual circles in Iran exist. Right. Artistic communities, intellectual circles, publications, bookstores, newspapers, and women's movement, which was very, very strong, and labor movement, labor unions, student movement. So it's a different, it's totally different society. I don't want to be sort of buried in that 1980s, right. And not be able to see the surface from where I'm buried under these kind of atrocities that happen. I mean, I never denied that these atrocities happen. Right. And so
I think it's fascinating, though, because you obviously have, it's not, if you'll allow me to like from the outside, just suggest that it doesn't even seem to me like you're discounting your trauma. It's just that the takeaway from it is actually consistent with your values. And I just think of what empathy, of course, what you're saying on some level is like your ideas about power don't change because of what you went through. And you can even see what you went through as fitting within those structures of power. But you also strike me as someone with a lot of empathy. And of course, I would say that my political analysis stems from my empathy, not to sound like self-righteous or corny or self-congratulating, but I care about people. That's why I care about this stuff, right? So it seems to me like your trauma shapes your views or reinforces it, but there's always, the question is like, in which way, right? Because people can become vindictive because of trauma, or they can become more empathetic because of trauma, right? It's like they hurt people. So people who go through trauma, I've seen, I mean, obviously people fall in the middle, but then you can also see these two extreme responses that are diametrically opposed, which is that someone becomes an abused person becomes abusive, or an abused person like dedicates their life to protecting others or stopping that kind of abuse. So,
no, exactly. I mean, we see that in Israel, I mean, that's how, I mean, the reality is that kind of atrocity transforms the perpetrators of violence, and it also transforms the people who were subjected to that kind of violence. But one thing that is very important, and I think is missed in the way the situation of human rights or civil liberties and political prisoners are presented is from the outside, is that that kind of victimhood that is, I mean, that's a sort of the point of departure that is, to me, it's so dangerous, because the discourse of victimhood has this assumption that the person who was subjected to this was totally innocent. I mean, I can say that historically I was innocent, right? Because I think that I was doing the right thing.
Right.
But in reality, I was a political actor. If I say, for example, that I want to overthrow this government,
right? Yeah,
and this government says that, okay, not so fast,
right?
I'm going to arrest you, I'm going to torture you, I'm going to do this and that. Then I can't say that I'm innocent,
Because you went in knowing what could happen.
I know what the consequences of this are, and I'm not saying that they should do that,
right?
But then when we say that these are innocent people, no, they're not. We are not innocent people. We are. I mean, there are all kinds of people. That's the way we need to understand this. Understand ourselves as political actors.
Right.
And once we understand ourselves as political actors, then once that moment of trauma, once that moment of atrocity ends, at least personally, then you go back to the drawing table to see what makes sense politically.
Right.
How can I advance an agenda for social justice now?
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do. I have an agenda for social justice. There's a particular way I see social justice, and hopefully nobody would touch me again because of this agenda I have, and I can, be free of any kind of pain and violence.
Right.
But if that happens, then I can't say that. But what have I done? I mean, I have done a lot. I want some credit for what I have done.
Wow.
So I don't know whether it makes sense or not.
No, yeah, that's so fascinating. Yeah, I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me, because knowing that there are people who were not almost executed, were not because you were freed from death row because they thought you were going to die from cancer, right?
That's right.
So it is so striking to me that you can have your views, because I don't know what I would feel like. I mean, I'm very anti-regime change, obviously. I'm very anti-hypocrisy. I'm very anti, I think I see through all the rank double standards and hypocrisy. Like Donald Trump saying this is a humanitarian issue and he's acting fast when he a couple weeks ago wanted to wipe out an entire civilization. But I don't know if I had been in your situation. I can't say that I wouldn't come out and be one of those people. I'd like to think I wouldn't be like this, but those people who say, free Iran, bomb Iran. They don't say that back to back, but basically that's what they advocate for, right? But the fact that there are people who say that, who haven't gone through anything close to what you went through, or, the same thing with Cuba. Like, I'd like to think that if I grew up in a, plantation, or I had family from a plantation, not working on it, owning it, I would still not say, let's starve Cubans to death, right? I actually think that the Iran example is really helpful because it shows it's a more extreme and immediate and direct example of the, I mean, maybe sociopathy, maybe human nature, I'm not sure, but certainly the cruelty that we see in Cubans who say, Cuban Americans who say, you know, free Cuba by starving Cubans. I mean, they don't say that. They want harsh sanctions on Cuba, right? But they want to cut the oil. But obviously that leads to death and destruction. But with the Iran stuff, you actually saw people calling for bombings.
That's right. That's right. No, I mean it's absurd. You know, it's I mean it's truly a scene from the theater of the absurd. That to think that justice is done if you destroy this country altogether. You know, and that's okay. You know, I mean, I hear this because I've been going around the country and I get a good sense of how Iranians and others are thinking about this, and I hear this so often. You know, why should I care for a country who pushed me out and now I live in exile?
Right.
And let them die. You know.
Right.
And okay, you know, but let them die, you know, that this is your aunt, your cousin, your mom,
exactly,
you know, like it's just, it's mind-boggling, you know, that you hear this, and it's hard to digest that what kind of notion of justice it follows that kind of logic. You know?
Yeah. But you strike me as someone who not only obviously says that don't kill a bunch of civilians, right, to free this country, but I mean, am I right? You don't strike me as someone who would say, and maybe you would, but like kill all the government, like spare the civilians, but let's take out all the.
No. I mean that's you know, that's what we're talking about, rule-based world order. You know, that's you know, that's the, you know, first of all, it's Article 1, Article 2 of the United Nations. You cannot violate another country's sovereignty. I can't say that now for this case, let's violate their sovereignty. You know, I can't do that. You know, and there are several executive orders in the U.S. and the United Nations Charter that prohibits the assassination of other countries' political leaders, and so either you believe in that or you don't, you know, and if you say that I believe in that, but in this case, let's sort of, you know, do this, and but no, that's a slippery slope. I don't want to be part of that slippery slope, you know, and I think that, you know, you talk about, you know, this is humanitarian. President Trump says this is humanitarian. I believe it when he practices a humanitarian policy inside the U.S. Let's try it here, you know, and if he can do that, then I would say, okay, let's try to do it together in some other parts of the world, you know.
Were you ever tempted to like turn away from your values? I mean, how did you deal? You said you found ways to deal with your trauma. I'm curious. I guess I have two questions, and feel free to just say next or no comment if this is too probing. But I'm curious, like, what helped you deal with trauma, and also if you had to do something to kind of force yourself to turn away from a vindictive, bitter response, or was it come naturally to you?
Yeah, I don't know even if trauma is the right word for what a person like me, the way I see myself, went through. You know, I think trauma primarily comes from the way you define the event. So, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of people go through the same events, but it registers so differently.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I had a project many years ago working on the concept of trauma in Iran-Iraq war, and you know, for years, like for example, I was looking at the question of trauma because we have PTSD, we have, you know, American soldiers coming from Vietnam. That gave rise to this very sort of widespread study of trauma, PTSD. And my question was that, has anybody studied the Vietnamese and the Viet Cong soldiers, and how did they deal with the question? So my point is that it all depends on how you define the event of which you were a part, and I think the first step for me to deal with the sort of consequences of that moment in my own life is the way I'm attributing a particular meaning to what I have done and what I was subjected to. And so that's why I said that maybe trauma is not the right word for it, because I attribute a different kind of meaning to what I have done and what processes I was a part of.
Right.
And but I don't know, being vengeful, and maybe that's a character issue. I don't know. I mean, I never think about it. I haven't gone to any therapy or analysis to see, okay, how do I deal with this? And so I if you know a good analyst, let me know.
Yeah. So you didn't do therapy on this issue, you're saying, or you didn't do therapy on anything?
No, on this issue, is I think, again, because I understood this as a political issue, and I dealt with it as such. And so here I am.
Wow.
Next.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just going to ask you something. Oh, what was life like under the Shah, by the way, because I don't think people understand why there was this revolution.
Can I promote my book, Remembering Akbar, here?
Yes, please. Yeah. And it's really excellent. It's like it's a not historic. It's like it's fictionalized. I mean,
it's a fiction. It's a sort of a literary memoir. It's a novel. That I sort of talk a lot about life under the Shah, and of course, these days there is kind of a nostalgic understanding of life before revolution, and often it's such a gendered kind of nostalgia, because women were not forced to comply with the dress code. We always show the streets, women walking with miniskirt, and that's the sign of civilization. But then the other side of it was that it was such a repressive kind of condition, and like anywhere else in the world. I mean, if you don't enter the world of politics, you can live your own life and never say anything or do anything, then you're fine, But if anyone wanted to participate in political debate in the country, in oppositional politics, paid a hefty price for it. And people were arrested for reading a book. People were, yes, this is the book. If anybody reads the book, I have a chapter there called What is to be Done. It gives you a very good sense of the atmosphere of fear and horror under the Shah, that you could not really breathe under those circumstances, because there was a sense that the secret police is everywhere. It was very similar to the way people depict East German Stasi, and that kind of, I don't know whether Stasi was everywhere, or the Savak was everywhere, but that didn't matter. The important thing was that you had to think that they're everywhere, and so and in that sense, and there's massive poverty in the country, and I mean, a lot of people talk about the development projects under the Shah, and there were some, but like at the time of revolution, only 30% of women were literate in Iran. in 1979, only 30% of women were literate. The life expectancy for women was 56 years old. So these are all sort of development indexes that gives you a sense of life under the Shah was far from that kind of heaven that people now try to portray, in terms of social justice, in terms of political freedoms, in terms of human rights. And that's why after the revolution, we have a lot of mixed bag after the revolution, because then there is very massive social development projects in place that changes the situation, like literacy, women's literacy rose to 92%, and in 20 years, and life expectancy rose to 76 years old for women, and almost equal with men, Again, I mean, I say these things that I don't want that to be misunderstood, that what a paradise we created after the revolution. But this is a mixed bag. There are a lot of things that happens after the revolution, and
you never hear any of that here. The other thing is, like, you're mentioning it, I would say, is important, because like you would have no idea about those stats.
No. I mean, no one cares about this. And if I say, I mean, I'm one of those people who says this, and then I'm accused of being a mouthpiece of the regime,
Exactly.
So, but these are the stats, these are the realities of that situation, how it's accomplished, what level of participation is there. All these things are, these are different issues that we can have a conversation about. But the reality is we need to recognize that many things had changed from a very, very poverty-stricken society under the Shah to a different kind of society, which actually now, again, going back down because of these economic crises, sanctions, mismanagement, corruption. All these things also happens, those who pay the price for that are ordinary people, and I'm sort of, I think now at this moment, to sort of move back to the conversation about the war, this is a very pivotal moment, important moment in the life of the Islamic Republic, to make a decision that this $300 billion reconstruction fund, where does this money going to go? How is it going to be allocated? Who's going to be part of the decision making in this? And how do people who need that are going to benefit from that? And how are they going to, with the absence, if the sanctions are lifted, because the sanctions actually gave the perfect cover for the rise of a form of corrupt crony capitalism in Iran. And now, if the sanctions are lifted, are they going to put in place a form of transparency in economic decision making? These are all issues that the Iranians need to deal with, and these are going to come head to head very soon inside the country, that people are going to demand a very meaningful changes in the way that politically decision makings are made, and issues of civil liberties, and economic policies and social justice issues. And but this is a moment, I mean, now the state feels invincible. They basically withstood against, in a war against two most military powers in the world, and I'm just hoping that invincibility is not translated into the way they deal with their own people. And they would translate that in accommodating the demands of people rather than resisting it. So maybe that's a good place to stop, huh?
Yeah,
Because we
yeah.
can go on forever.
I know. This is amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. I highly recommend both of the books that I've read of yours. I'm gonna jump into the Foucault one soon, but
Okay.
really great. Yeah. And thank you so much for this. This was really fascinating.
Of course, Katie, this was wonderful.
Yeah. And come back again soon.
Okay.
Have a
Thank
great
you so
night.
much.
Thank you.
Have a
What an amazing interview. A lot of people were saying thank you for this interview in the comments. I think people really enjoyed it. I love these interviews where I get to mix the personal and the political. So I have to do that more. I used to do that more when I did just the podcast and not a YouTube show, because for whatever reason I could have the podcast be like a little bit less. I don't know what the reason is, but like it's just a different rhythm when you're doing a podcast versus a live video. But yeah, that was wonderful. And let's see. I don't think. Let me. I'm going to bring on Brad to walk me through this. Hi, Brad.
Hey, Katie.
How's it going?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, that was great listening to Behrooz.
Yeah, wasn't that amazing? I just can't get over. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the death penalty part of it is not actually the relevant parallel, but like his position on Iran reminds me of people who have been whose like loved ones have been killed and they still oppose the death penalty. You know what I mean? It's like, why can't they have this? It's so amazing because I mean, I'm so anti-death penalty, but I have no idea what I'd think or feel if I had a loved one who was killed. But what I do know is I so admire people who have had loved ones who were killed and are like, that still doesn't make this right or okay. I mean, it's one thing to be like not believing in it if the person's innocent, you know, but I'm saying like people where it's not even contested, like when the person doesn't even say that they didn't do it.
Yeah, I think that Behrooz really summed it up when he said, your politics can't be an extension of your trauma.
I know. It's such a great line. You know who I have to have him on with? Gabor Mate. Yeah.
Of course.
It can be an extension, but I do think it can be trauma-informed. It can be trauma-informed. It just depends on the direction.
I mean, and clearly that's easier said than done in
I think
some
maybe it is
instances.
for him. I feel like for him, like he said something about it being a character issue, not being vindictive. I think that there are some people for whom, for whatever reason, it is easier. It's very interesting. Anyway, but that was amazing. So we're not going to.
I mean, clearly, the world would be a better place if everyone had the fortitude to adhere to that sort of philosophy.
Yeah. Should we Patreon any of the first chunk?
Well, let's get back to the most important comments here.
Oh yeah, let's give a big thanks to Brad. Oh yeah, wow.
I know.
Who did you pay for these comments?
Look, I'm not going to divulge that, Katie, but all I'm saying is that the lobby is growing.
The lobby is growing. Yeah. Let's see. Did we get any Patreons? I thought we would get some with time. It's okay. Let me thank the recent Patreons that we did get. Oh, you know, we also have a cool Patreon that I put up there. I'm definitely not going to Patreon any of Behrooz. Should we Patreon any of the first part, or should we just, you know, we have hold on one second.
Well, we're going to be, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction to that, Katie, would be that I think we're going to be we're going to be releasing for Patreons the conversation with Daniel.
No, we're not. We're not. We're not. I'll have to talk to you about that.
Okay.
We're gonna cut it down. So
and then well, regardless of that, then we have the upcoming that we're going to be doing recording tomorrow.
Oh yeah, we're going to do early release. We should pretend it's just forever. Yeah, that we'll never get it, but yeah, we're going to get.
Well, I don't think we have to pretend. I think that it's clear, like, and not really that unusual, where, you know, one of the benefits aside from being able to make this program happen would be Patreon supporters get a lot of the content. They get it in full and they get it first.
Right. Exactly.
Not that it just solely exists for patrons, but they get it early.
Yes, but we also updated, wait, let me delete this comment. So we also have an extra thing for you, which is that I recorded an unrecorded talk at something called the Deep Water Literary Festival. And so let me actually show you some of this. It's a really cool talk that was with Quinn Slobodian, who we've had on the show before, and Ben Tarnoff, who we haven't. They wrote a really cool book called Musk-ism. So let me do a little preview of this, okay? How's that, Brad? But yeah, we're gonna have this amazing. How cool is that? A debate between Mearsheimer and Yanis Varoufakis. But here's the thing. So I'm gonna play a little bit of this. Quinn is a brilliant historian, and Ben is a great kind of also brilliant analyst of like technology, and wrote Internet for the People. And he actually wrote a piece about when Assad Haider died. He wrote a great piece about him in the New York Review of Books. So let me play this. It's just part of a video. And what you need to know is, I started filming here right after Quinn he's comparing the way that people reacted to the book Musk-ism, A Guide for the Perplexed, which is about Elon Musk, but also the system like that created him. He compares the reaction in Europe with the reaction in the United States. And he says that in Europe, they have already taken more like concrete measures to push back against Musk, like related to Starlink and stuff like that. So here, let's just play some of that. Then I'm going to go off stage. Oops.
Anymore. We go back to the access. Do we need to not be dependent on SpaceX anymore? We go back to the US and start talking about it, and immediately there was a switch to moralization, which is just like, I don't want to hear about his businesses. I hate this guy. Tell me why he is the way he is, and basically like give me more fodder for my personal rage vendetta against this individual Musk. And it took a while, I think, for us to understand why the reception was landing like that. And I think it's because the dependency that we were describing is so deep in the case of America, American state capacity, American financial markets, American index funds, as I'm sure we'll get around to, that it's almost impossible to imagine unplugging from Musk or Musk-ism. So in that sense of impotence, you default to a kind of childish sense of anger and denial, really, and wanting to lash out at this person. And when you lash out, you can't lash out at infrastructure. It's very hard to do. So you lash out at the person with a face, which is Elon Musk. So I think it's actually a sign of the relative immaturity of our own collective relationship to the problem of dependency on tech companies, and a sign of how much further we have to go before we can even begin to conceive of thinking about this systematically rather than individually.
Whereas the Europeans have already started that.
Yeah, I mean, they're
it's putting
on step one on the to square 100, but
and that's Nina Burley, who just interjected, who's written some really cool books, including a book about fake Israeli archaeology, which I'm going to read and interview her about soon.
Yeah, I mean, they're it's putting on step one on the to square 100. But that sense of distance is possible in a way that it seems still almost impossible in the United States in many cases.
Right.
I think the Europeans also have an additional benefit, which is that they have a bit more distance from the situation. And I think there is just something about how it feels to live in America right now that makes it harder for people to acquire that distance that is arguably necessary for a degree of kind of analytic precision. I was struck, I've been going to different events at the festival, and it feels like that really has been a theme of the presentations, of just how maybe out of time people feel, or how dislocated, how crazy, accelerated. And I completely sympathize with that. I think it's not unrelated to the fact that the market for nonfiction is really difficult right now. There's a long story we've been talking about recently. It's like difficult to get people to engage with a reality that feels very, not just scary, but incomprehensible. And I think in our approach, we're very critical of Musk. Our political home is very much on the left, but the book is presented not in a polemical or agitational way. It's really presented in an analytical way. because I think we both have this belief that there are political stakes to analytic precision, and that there is a role for agitation and a role for polemic, but that we actually need to try to understand how the system operates if we want to make productive political interventions.
To that end, to the end of the analytical work that you've done, you compare Musk-ism to Fordism. For people who haven't yet read the book, can you tell us what Musk-ism in one sentence? Each of you can take it on.
All right, and you'll have to become Patreons to see how they define Musk-ism and Fordism. And by the way, I want to thank our recent Patreons, because let's see, since last week we got a lot. This is great. Brad, what was the date of our last Patreon? Our last stream was the 16th. So I thanked all the people then. So since the 16th, Gail, I want to thank Gail for becoming a member. James Joyce for becoming a member. Sorry, I don't usually do the first and last name, but maybe that is their first and last name. I thought it was a reference to the writer. Thing, HM, Christina, Erasmus, Tina, Eric, Alan, Shifa, Gary, Jayashri, Van Stan, Donna, Suresh, Camden, Hybrid, Vigor, Sunhak, Axel, Mickey, Mona. Thank you guys so much for becoming members. Really appreciate it.
Katie, the audio, just in case I didn't understand correctly, but in that clip that you were playing, the first thing, were they saying the first person was talking about kind of being critical of people at large, lashing out at Elon Musk instead of like a systemic critique?
He wasn't critical of it. He was just saying that there was more of the personalized lashing out in the United States than there was in Europe when they were traveling around there, when they were on book tour.
Oh, I mean, to me, I feel like that's kind of more indicative of like the individualization, like the lack of systemic critique in US media. Like the people are kind of reflecting what they're being said.
Yeah, but I mean, it's presented in a sensationalized way. I actually asked a question that you can see in the video. I think I was filming then, but I asked a question about how you can galvanize around the individual, because the truth is, like, sometimes we on the left, we like to get it's kind of boring and pedantic. It's like, well, it's about movements and structures and not leaders, but like people are moved by story and leaders. And so to me, the question is how you can galvanize around stories and leaders to look at the system and the systemic critique. But Brad, we got to go because we have to do some sleuthing.
And to me, I feel like it's a yes and, where it's like, I'm all for systemic critique, but also I have plenty of smoke for Elon Musk, the individual.
Well, yeah, of course. That's literally, I don't think I could have said it more yes and than I already had, but I salute your additional yes and. You yes ended my yes and. Yeah. And now I'm going to yes end. And thank everyone so much for coming to the show, and thank all of our guests. And we will see you Friday, and I'll be interviewing, among others, Jeremy Corbyn, about Keir Starmer. It'll be a very interesting perspective. Jeremy will be talking about the man who, chased him out of the leadership of the Labour Party, who now himself has stood down. And also shout out to the Labour Party for having their head, literally the head of the Labour Party, literally justifying like starving the people of Gaza. I mean, something that even Joe Biden and Trump didn't say. He literally defended it, and he's supposed to be a human rights lawyer. All right. Anything else I need to say? There's tons of great stuff on the Patreon. You'll have early access to a John Mearsheimer, Yanis Varoufakis debate. We will see you Friday. Subscribe, become Patreons, like the show if you haven't. And thank you, Nate. Thank you, Phantomus Fanta, for the clip. Thank you, Brad. And thank you to all of our guests.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!